AVP.
All right, for today's guest, my good friend, Dr. Dwayne. I'll talk about Dr. Dwayne a little bit first. So back, is it now like maybe 3 years ago now, I did a heart scan and my calcium score was a little bit higher than it was supposed to. I was afraid. I didn't know what to do. Was my career over? And then Doran told me to message Dr. Dwayne, and Dr. Dwayne pretty much set up a new lifestyle for me, and that was more health conscious. This is when I started like being way more health conscious, and I started like monitoring my blood pressure every day and doing things like that. So Dr. Dwayne played a huge part in saving my career and maybe even my life down the road. So thanks, Dr. Dwayne, and I'm happy to have you on today. So how are you?
Doing well, and thank you, Antoine. I love helping good people, so you're one of the good ones. So I'm happy you're healthy, alive, married,
Yeah,
house, kid on the
yeah,
way.
kid on the way.
Like who knew?
So
Eh?
that's all. Yeah, I know who knew. So those are all great gifts that life gave me,
Yeah.
and so I'm happy to have you on the podcast, which is brought to you by Jack Factory. Check the links in my description, and click the links to support me and make this podcast possible. But now, Dr. Dwayne, so what have you been doing lately? Because you moved to the West on a little remote island, pretty much, and you just ran away from it. Yeah, ran away from the city. So, do you like it over there?
I love it. Yeah. So we moved out as far as you possibly could be in Canada. We're the last house. We're right on the edge of the world. This place is known as living on the edge. So our beach actually off our house, you can see Mount Rainier and Seattle and the whole Washington kind of state coastline there from it. So it's a really interesting place. It's a rainforest, which is the only one in Canada. So that's really neat. So we have this, I've got my property has blackberries and raspberries and thimbleberries and salal berries. So I can go back and pick stuff, and it's just it's a different lifestyle out here. It's just really neat out here on Vancouver Island. So it's part of that whole process you and I have gone through, where it's like, I've done the sports, I've messed up my body with the sports, and I've always worked on my mind. So that's good. So now it's time to work on the, the whole spiritual aspect and the personal growth area when you get out to places like this.
That's cool. So what makes a forest a rainforest? Like
a lot of rain. Yeah. And
a lot of rain.
Yeah. So okay. But we don't get, it's funny because we don't get a lot of rain. Like if you were to look at the weather, there's a lot of beach camps here because it's a very small surf area, but it's a lot of people come here, like 1 million people a year come here, but there's only 1,900 people live here. And
1,900 people live in that. Okay.
1,900 people. Yeah.
Very small town, I guess.
That's like it's a district. Yeah. It's really, really small. But if you go on a map and you look at Tofino and Ucluelet, where we live, it's like an island off the island, right? it's basically the end of Canada. You drive as far as you can to the ocean. And then when you hit the Pacific, you hang a left to go toward my place and a right to go toward Tofino. And I'm like the last house that you can get to. So it's kind of neat. But the rainforest aspect of it's really cool because we get like dumps of rain that are like, like what we would get in Ontario in, the whole summer, for example, we might get in like a week. And like it's a big rain and then it's sunny. Like, so today it's like this week's been super duper sunny. So it's, in terms of seasonal affective disorder, you can get it pretty quick out here and I'm colorblind. So it's, the red greens aren't as bright, but all the days that we get that are amazing in terms of weather are just unbelievable. And then the real stormy stuff is real fun to watch because, we have these massive waves off our beach and there's a lot of, our beach, our areas, like our actual house is named after this, this boat that crashed on our beach. So
really?
So we have the graveyard of the Pacific right in front of our house. It's called.
Whoa.
And, yeah. Boats get lost and they get into these rocks. So it's got a lot of history and everything else. There's a lot of exploration and stuff that I wouldn't normally do when I was, racing pro motocross or bodybuilding or all these, in academia. I can actually, in between podcasts, head out to the beach, and meditation is no longer, sitting there and breathing. It's just going out for a coffee on my beach. So it's
nice.
That's
dope.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's pretty crazy how like in Toronto, because have you lived in what's the biggest city you've lived in? Was it Toronto or?
Yeah. Toronto, or when I was living down in the US, like in the Connecticut region was pretty large. Yeah, and I live in Florida when I raced dirt bikes. I lived in Ocala, which is
Mm.
where all the funny Florida memes come from. So I've lived in big cities. So this is a big shift. Absolutely.
Yeah, because sometimes like, I'm sure in a building in Toronto or maybe two buildings together, I don't know the data, but they might have like almost 2,000 people in one
Right.
place,
Right. Yeah.
all jammed up, and now you have a whole town of like 1,900 people, which is like you probably can start like to know them.
Well, this
What?
is why we moved here, because community is really lost, right? And when your community gets lost, like when you don't have an actual tight knit community of strangers that are doing the same thing to try and make the community better, you get a lot of independent operators or silos, right? Like in the city. And what's neat about here is it's like where I grew up when I was a kid in the 70s. It's community and it's community based. So like if you're an asshole who has road rage all the time, which you can't have out here, it's just too chill.
Mhm.
You're going to be known quite easily, and people have been known to get run out of town. And so,
Oh wow.
yeah, so it keeps you honest. I love that. And to be honest, it's really neat to be able to know your community and the people that are actually, running your town. I have like two friends that are on council here.
Mm.
So it's a totally different dynamic than what I was ever used to in the big cities. It took a bit to get used to. Internet only made it here in 2017, high speed.
What? That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
So that's a really, that's a big thing, but that's what brought the population here. Like people, there's, people like that do gig work and stuff like that can actually work here now. So that's how it's kind of turned into more of a community.
I guess you have to kind of work remotely unless you're working directly for the town and just whatever, right? Like if you have a coffee shop, that'll be your
Exactly.
job. But everybody else that are outsiders, they kind of have to work remotely because I guess most of the jobs are kind of taken because the more people, the more jobs are created. But if there's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of job you can do in the town, I guess. So that's
Well, it's fun. It's funny actually because there's too many jobs because there's not enough people, right? Because it's
oh,
very expensive to live here. Like we call it Yuki tax, and like so just housing alone is crazy, right? Like moving out here, and then a lot of people have to rent out any space they have as Airbnbs as a mortgage helper, right?
mm,
So thankfully we're fortunate enough that we don't have to do that. But so there's like a lack of rent, just like we see in the big cities, right? And there's lots of good jobs and they pay well here because that's the only way you're going to get people to come. But people are transient. They come here, they make
mm,
some money and then they just kind of get out of here. They'll go to Costa Rica or something like that in a van. They'll surf down there because it's a real big hippie culture here. And
okay.
so it's really neat because no one really, and I'm generalizing, but no one really here has a mandate to, stick around in one place for too long. So it's kind of a neat place to watch people come and go.
Yeah, I guess you must be more comfortable raising your kid here than in a big city, right?
You nailed it, buddy. That's it right there. And and she's like the mayor here, man. She like, seriously, because she started in grade 2, right? So she's like, now she's in grade 4, going into grade 5 this next month. And it's amazing because when you're young, right? You only have to put in a couple years and it's half your life. And then you've
Mm,
been here half your life. So you're like an original, right? You're like a local, true and true.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even me, like with my kid my first one coming in November, I'm already thinking with the Taylor, like if we get, when we get another one, I think we should maybe move to a place that has like maybe more rural, less homeless crisis around because now like there's people like smoking like hard drugs like in front of our house sometimes. So I'm like maybe I should like buy like an acre of land and just have a little compound there, and it seems more fun now and more like in tune with what I want to do because I did live in Toronto and that was different.
Oh yeah.
That was like people like don't even say hi to each other because it's like they would say hi all day, so they just like kind of run by each other. There's like drugs everywhere, but if you want to party, the cities is where it's at, right? Because then you
Yep.
everybody wants to party, go in one place, and there's like 1,000 people who party at the same time. So yeah, but for me, it wasn't good, obviously. So I'm thinking, like, for my child, like, what do I want to do? Like, I think, I guess some place is more calm and,
Well, you want to know what, Antoine, and it's funny because like you and I think a lot alike. That's why we get along so well. When I moved out here, it was my wife. she wanted to move somewhere that was, relatively warm all year round. So we don't get snow or anything here. It doesn't get hot like Ontario, but we get, between 21 and 23 degrees Celsius all summer, and it goes down to maybe 10 or 12 average in the winter, maybe 9 average in the winter.
That's not bad at
Celsius,
all.
yeah. No, it's for bodybuilders and whatnot. This is like, whoa.
I know.
It's
I
kind of
know.
like
It's
San
great.
Diego with a little bit of a twist, right?
Oh,
Um,
gotcha.
but out here, what's neat about it is because you are in this place of peace and you're in this place of, there's a lot of spiritual stuff out here because the indigenous, have these treaties with us. So we have these like, amazing hiking trails. We've got probably a 200 or 300-foot Sitka spruce right on our property over the beach. So everything you look at has a very high signal, like good shit coming at you, right? Everywhere you look, oh, look, there's a bear getting into my garbage. Isn't he cute? Or, oh, look at that. There goes a friggin', mountain lion, or there goes a cougar. And that stuff is what makes the brain activate and be very, very in peace, because nature is kind of where you need to be. So you'll feel it. You feel it when you get to these places. Your kids feel it. Everything's calm. There's not that, sense of urgency. And you realize real quick that urgency does not make you more productive or a better person.
No. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I read somewhere or I heard that the human brain was kind of like built and like evolved into living in a place that has only like a village only of a max 1,000 people. That's what we're used to or something. And then if we go over that, it's like it gets a little bit weird.
Well, yeah, and I mean, really, it's funny because the more people you get in any particular region, the greater the propensity for the outliers within the kind of the environment that the place is developed for become more abundant. So you end up with more people that are a little more rogue as it gets bigger, because you become more anonymous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny out here because anonymity is really not existent. And especially for someone like me, people know who I am and what I do, then it's really good because it keeps you honest, right? And one of the things I noticed the minute I moved here was that when you drive around, like, no one's riding your ass. In fact, people pull over when you're coming up on them and you get too close. They just pull over and let you by. So it's a whole different mindset of like, they're not mad that you're coming up. They're just like, hey, go by, man. I'm not going that fast. And so you have this a collegial atmosphere that, everybody gets along, and it's really nice. And yeah, you learn to shed some skin that the city, the callus that the
Yeah.
city puts on you.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And you know how like when the Native Americans all kind of most of them died from disease because the evil white people came over and all that stuff. And then what happened is that the bison population, the buffalo, just like because their main like population control for the bisons were like the natives. So now there was like millions of like buffaloes in Canada and across America. And then what happens is that the if there's like overpopulation, then there's like disease starts to appear, shit gets wrong. So do you think that because of the cities, because we're kind of like an animal too, disease starts to happen more when there's overpopulation, but maybe for us it's more in the sense of like mental disease. So you think if you live a city, there's a higher chance of like having bad mental health than if you would live like in a smaller town in nature?
I think the way we live in cities makes us have a higher propensity for depressive disorders and anxiety disorders and whatnot, mainly because we disconnect from society, which seems really odd when you're in a big one, but more people disconnect in the city from society than they do in a small place like where I'm at. So just for example, with cell phones, when you're in the city, generally people are operating, like I said, like as silos on their own in a space full of people. When you're here, yeah, people use their phones and everything else. We got the same things, but there's a lot of interaction or interruption in your whatever you're doing, because there's always people that will go by you that and so you have a greater propensity to interact with people in these small towns, unless you're super duper reclusive. But even then, like, I have a bunch of friends I've met out here who are, they like to keep themselves. They're still very, very social compared to, when you're in the city. In fact, sometimes in the city, I remember actually trying to be as anonymous as possible by, wearing, like, when the masks were on and the glasses and all that stuff. It was awesome because I could actually, like, hide my way through things to get things done. Here, you're not looking for that. So it frees up a lot of mind space. And I talk about, like, this whole signal to noise thing, is that when you're in a place that doesn't have a lot of external stress that we feel, you have a very, very high signal. So here we have, like, the trees, we have the ocean, we have the animals, we have the whales, we have fresh food, unbelievable food here, unbelievable restaurants here, some of the best in the world. So there's a lot of signal, a lot of good shit. The noise, so say, for example, light pollution, people talking and muttering around, moving around in the space, cars, trains, all that stuff. They're non-existent, right? We don't have a train out here, but we have the noise. The ocean makes a sound like a train. It's really wild when I first moved it here. And we have these bells and these whistles out front that mark the channel because all these boats crash there. So there is noise, but it's really neat. They're actually like sea noises. So they become an actual signal. So honestly, there's very little noise here. Maybe a skill saw going off because someone's building a house once in a while, or a chainsaw because there's some logging. But it's not, you have time to be outside your head without feeling stress. That's
I guess there's a reason why, like, if you go on YouTube, you write like a relaxing video, like 10-hour relaxing video meditation. You're never going to hear cars and honking and people swearing and the city. You're going to hear like waves and maybe like droplets of rain falling and a couple birds. And there's a reason for that.
And it's funny because when we go on walks, and I do a walk every day, we have this thing called the Wild Pacific Trail beside us. And it's like a 5K walk. So it's nice. You just get out for a loop and it's in nature. When you walk along, it's so pristine and the ferns are so big and all the big cedars and everything. And the bird and the actual sounds, we've said numerous times, oh, it sounds like we're at Disney World. And then we have to actually redact it and say, well, actually, Disney World is trying to emulate this feeling and sound when you go there. Right. So that's how, brainwashed we are. So
that's funny. So, all right. So let's go to some of the questions now. And there's a lot of bodybuilders watching right now, and some of them young, some of them older. But what is the main enemy of bodybuilders health-wise that every one of them should be looking for, young or old? Because young, they can prevent a lot of things if they can start checking stuff. And if I checked things earlier, for me, I could have maybe saved some problems that I had, and maybe that will come down the road. So what would be the main enemy of bodybuilders health-wise?
Yeah. So, I mean, the main enemy is cardiovascular issues. And they're, the best way for us to be able to get at that, from a bird's eye view where we sit with our cardiovascular health is through measuring blood pressure on a regular basis. And blood pressure obviously has high blood pressure has a number of different ways it can, attack organs. Some people will succumb to cardiomyopathies, enlarged left ventricle, this kind of stuff. Others may not have that at all, and they may have, problems with their kidneys because the kidneys don't like that high pressure when we're trying to push all that blood through it. But the key here is that the heart actually has it's central to all those core organs that we have, and they all talk to each other. So as soon as one organ kind of gets sideways, then the other ones start to kind of suffer too. So if you measure your blood pressure and you're hypertensive, which means, anywhere above 130 now, we're considering this kind of a hypertensive situation. It's mild, but it's there. And you measure it continuously throughout the day, and it always stays 130, 150 over 70, 40 over 60. You have to take heed of that because it doesn't only mean that blood pressure is high, but it means that there's probably other things that are going sideways too, like your blood cholesterol and your, any sort of inflammatory factors that go along with it, because there's a reason why that pressure is up.
So how many days in a row, if somebody has over 130, that they should be like, you know what, maybe I should do another test? And what would that test be?
Yeah. So if, you know, when it's pretty easy to hit 130, I'm sure a lot of guys out there will be saying, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So if the key is this, all right, if your blood pressure is consistently over 130, and if you're a bodybuilder, I mean, not everybody, most are in a little bit of denial. And they'll measure it, you know, and I'm sure you've done this. Oh, 136. I guess there's something going on here. Just a little adjust of the coffee poo here. We'll just take a little more of a rest, take another measurement. If you're doing that over and over again to hit 129 over 78 for your blood pressure, then, you know, you want to start looking into what's going on. If you're taking, you know, prophylactic telmisartan, which a lot of people are, an ARB, then and your blood pressure is still a little elevated, then now we probably should do some testing and whatnot to, you know, to see if there's any other cardiovascular stuff that we need to be concerned with. For the first thing I would do, really, to be honest, is run a regular blood panel, get all your blood lipids done, get lipoprotein A done, because lipoprotein A is going to tell us whether or not, if you have cholesterol issues, which you probably will, whether they're familial or genetic or not. Lipoprotein A is a great marker for that, because if it's up, there's not a hell of a lot we can do to bring it really down far, because it's a genetic thing. And usually the other, you know, cholesterol, all the different cholesterol markers will also be out of whack. So low HDL, high LDL. So when we know what our blood pressure is and we know what our lipid status is, then we also want to know what our inflammatory status is. And so the inflammatory status is generally, we usually measure that with HSCRP, or high sensitivity C-reactive protein. And if that's elevated and we've got dyslipidemia, so our cholesterol is all out of whack, and we've got this blood pressure thing going on, you've kind of got yourself set up for a situation where you're likely going to have some issues with high calcium score, which then indicates atherosclerosis and in, you know, the coronary arteries, which you don't really want to have, because that stops blood flow to the heart. So really start there. Get your cholesterol checked. If you can throw lipoprotein A in there, do that. Then we'll know whether you got to really pay attention, because it might be genetic. And then check that inflammation. And then last but not least, make sure your blood glucose is in check, because a lot of bodybuilders, believe it or not, have, you know, issues with insulin insensitivity. And generally, you know, from GH and all these different peptides and whatnot, secretagogues for GH, we'll get some insulin issues. So overall, once we have an idea of that, if we have a little bit high blood glucose, lipids are looking a little shitty, oh, we're inflamed, and we have high blood pressure, that is what I call the trifecta. That those lipids, the lipids, the blood glucose, and the inflammatory aspects. That's kind of the trifecta of how we get a high calcium score when we have high blood pressure.
So that's pretty good. So pretty much like take the high blood pressure, and then if it's always a little bit too high, do some blood work, and then if blood work is all, you can look for the trifecta, like you said, the lipids versus the pressure versus the inflammation, and then after that, obviously you would do a further testing, I'm assuming, or you would try to change. I mean, as soon as you see that, you should change your lifestyle, and we'll
100%.
talk about that later. But so let's say if you're young, you're in your early 20s, and this is all for enhanced bodybuilding, because a natural bodybuilder would have no problem with all this.
They may, because when we force feed and all those kind of things. But yeah, I know a lot of this is driven by high androgen use. You know,
Okay.
we'll talk about it in a bit.
Yeah, and so let's say if you're in early 20s, you only have high blood pressure, but your blood work is fine for now. But how long would that last? Because I've noticed that people who are very young, they can bounce back from bad blood work way easier than somebody who's been, you know, competing for like over 10 years, 15 years. So what should they do, the young people? Should they just check anyway? How can they prevent it?
This is a great question. I actually just did Dave Tate's podcast and Table Talk, and we had a deep talk about these kind of things. It's going to shake the foundation a little on that one. Okay, so when we're young, okay, so in powerlifting, it's like, hey, are you ready to die? Like they literally, like, yeah, if I'm ready to die, okay, you're going to be a champion, right? When you're young, it's really, really, like you said, it's easy to bounce back. We see this with everything, right? Recovery from exercise. Oh, I dropped my calories by 500 calories a day. Oh, I stepped on the scale at the end of the week and I'm a pound lighter. It's fucking like clockwork, right?
Mm.
And that's because what I say is, we're pink inside when we're young, right? We're a new car. We can tow shit and drive the shit out of it all we want until it gets about 100,000 miles on it. And then it, probably going to have to do some work on it if we want to drive the shit out of it. So when we're young, we can drive our bodies as hard as we want. I know this, that we've done this in the past. With my pro motocross career, I was flying off motorcycles at 70 miles an hour, getting concussions and breaking bones left, right, and center and surgeries. And honestly, a broken collarbone was 3 weeks, okay, to heal. And we get it healed, and then we'd be racing again in 4. Knee surgeries were fast, everything was quick. But as I got older, it took a little longer to heal, right? It's the same thing as when we're young, we start in bodybuilding. Now I started when I was like 14, 15, getting really serious into it. Started using PEDs at 16, maybe something like that. I was at the point where I was actually having to like use my lunch money, you know what I mean? Like to get tested, I'd be like hoarding the $10 like for like, 10 days kind of thing.
That's funny.
Terrible, man. My parents are dead, so they won't hear this. When you're young, you can pretty much do what you want and you can kind of bounce back. The body's very resilient. It's resilient throughout life. The problem is that you have small mounting issues that occur over time. And so what I see in young bodybuilders that start at a young age, like myself, there's a lot of them. Usually by 19, 20 years old, they've put on some serious mass. They're going on stage over 200 pounds, walking around at 225, 250. In my case, I used to get good and chubby during my off season. So like 260. But the key is that, you diet comes off, everything works, everything's good. Blood work goes sideways during your prep. I didn't even check blood work. And that's why I have a kidney transplant. But the point is that as you progress and you stress the body with force feeding, lack of recovery, sleep recovery, all those things you do when you're younger, like you're partying and competing and all this, and it works. Those habits get reinforced. And when you get to about 32, 33, that's when you start going, things aren't really working that well. And then you go in and you have a couple of some blood work done. You maybe get a calcium score and you go, holy shit, I've got some sort of start of a disease. Mm-hmm. And it's at that point, like I said, like 32 to 34, 36 is when we really start to have to think about, all right, we need to fix stuff we broke. Mm-hmm. And the problem with this approach though, is that generally we go in denial at this stage and then we let her rip till we're 40. And it's usually when there's a debilitative injury, usually organs for bodybuilders, that we decide that we need to stop. And I'm trying to flip this over because you've been a testament to this. And I've, dealt with probably 50 or 60 pros in the last couple of years in the off season, is that you actually would be way better having a healthy body, as healthy as possible. This isn't a healthy sport, but as healthy as possible all the way through, because then you have a longer time in the sport and you don't have to quit because you broke something. You can actually go longer. And if you look at some of the bodybuilders from before the 90s, like, so before I started bodybuilding, competing, you'll notice that a lot of them lived relatively long lives. And that was generally because it started out, if you go back, like to Sando's time, it started out as an actual healthy endeavor that then turned into, more of obviously a freak show. And that really got big in the 90s. And then, it's kind of just developed from there. So we really need to start thinking about how do we do the same thing, but do it healthy, because healthy bodies build more muscle and we can use less stuff to get to the same place or better with a healthy body, because it's not fighting disease at the same time as it's trying to build this super duper massive physique. So it's imperative for performance and it's imperative for longevity in the sport and imperative for you to survive at the end, so you can actually share your trophies with your grandkids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
That's
So
true. I was going to do a little pee break. I only lasted 30 minutes. Can't believe this. Too much water. I'll be right back.
sure.
Bathroom's right there. One sec. But what about testosterone? If you have low testosterone, you won't achieve your fitness goals easily, that's for sure. Low testosterone can reduce your mass and your strength, can also reduce your bone density and make you depressed and tired. So it's time to fix your testosterone level. Live Forever Health can fix that. They'll send you a home kit, you send the kit back, they get the result, go over the results with them. They will send you a legit prescription for testosterone in the mail and also send that testosterone in the mail. As a man, as you get older, it will go down, or if you're retired from competing and things like that, your testosterone levels will be low. You don't want that because you want all the gains, right? If you have low testosterone, it's not gonna happen. I've heard so much good thing about Live Forever Health, so that's why I'm supporting them and they're sponsoring my video right here. They could not make it easier. So what are you waiting for? Stop listening to the gym bros and start listening to some doctors. All right, take care of your health starting today. We're back. So with all of that said, when should a bodybuilder, a pro bodybuilder, should retire then?
Ooh, that's a toughie, isn't it?
From a doctor's opinion.
You know, I'd be a hypocrite. I mean, you know, I've competed in 2 pro sports, and then bodybuilding, I treat it like a pro sport, but I really didn't ever want to be a pro. I just want to be 300 pounds. It's funny because in all the sports that I've competed in, so motocross, and then I raced Sea-Doos professionally, you know, on the big water. For me, it was, you know, debilitating injury. And even then it was like, you know, I'd recover and come back. So it's hard to actually, you know, give that piece of advice without giving that preface. Now, if I were to give advice to myself, which sounds funny, like I can't do it, but if I could give advice to myself back, you know, when I was in my 20s, I would have said, listen, you know how to be healthy. You're really good at this. You study it, you know, you're doing great. So get your blood work done regularly, and not regularly what your physician says, you know, once a year for a checkup, or even if you're young, they won't even do one. Get your blood work done, you know, at least, you know, every 6 months, if not quarterly. So every 3 months, because catch things at the beginning. Your blood work is pretty good at letting you know some stuff's going a little sideways, and let yourself repair. And I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you right now that, you know, I started competing at 17 and I didn't have any problems at all. You know, because my mom was sending me in for my physicals every year and everything else. I didn't have any issues until I was old enough to afford whatever I wanted from the sport. And I had my own autonomy on, you know, whether or not I go to the doctors. My mom just assumed I was. So denial is probably, the lack of denial is probably my biggest advice to all bodybuilders. We know when we don't feel good. We know when things just don't seem right. And so get some blood work done, and high likelihood you'll see something that's not right. Likely blood lipids, probably your hematocrit, so the mass of red cells in your blood is up, and you know there's a high likelihood you're inflamed. Get those under control, get them back to baseline, get them back to normal, and then proceed. And back in the 90s, when I started competing, we used to do that. There was a rule. For every, you know, month you were on stuff, you took 2 months off to heal. And that changed a lot in the 2000s, where we started doing blast and cruise and all these other things. And that was because there was accessibility, or there is accessibility to the PEDs. In the 90s, we had to find someone who knew a vet or robbed a pharmacy, but you got what you got. Like everybody on stage was probably taking the same shit. You know, it was probably like EQ and some Prope or something, or I had some Univet stuff one time that had estradiol in it. It's all I could get. So, you know, I'm taking Nolvadex because that's all we had for an aromatase inhibitor, but you just did what you did, right? And then now there's this whole world of, you know, education on how to use it, where you get it from. There's numbers of different companies. And so it becomes much more accessible. And as you know, as a, you know, former drug addict and everything else, accessibility makes it a lot easier to get really into it. And bodybuilding's fun. Like modifying the body is a fun thing. So keep it in check. And the idea is don't go into denial. Do your blood work. If things look sideways, reach out to someone like myself or, someone who you trust that can look at your stuff and know you're a bodybuilder and be able to say, this isn't liver dysfunction. This is because you trained legs before you worked out. And, don't worry so much about, this cholesterol measure, this high total cholesterol, because it's actually because you have such high HDL and your LDL is perfect, but it's a little bit toward the high end. There's a lot of ways that we can go through the labs and assure ourselves without denial that we're either healthy or we need a little bit of a break. And I mean, Antoine, that when we took those little breaks, you didn't really lose anything. And when we came back, you came back stronger.
No, I mean, I lost some fullness and maybe a little bit of size, but then when I would start prep, all that didn't matter anymore because I was actually better than I was before. I've never not been worse than before at every prep, and I've changed things in the recent years for sure when I'm in the off season. But let's say you have a client that's like he's 39 or late 30s or early 40s, and then what would make you say to him that, hey, maybe you should stop doing this? What would make you say that?
So, and I've had, actually, there'll be people listening to this that I've had those conversations with. So, I mean, so basically if I start to see, so first off, a lot of guys come to me after they've had a heart attack. Okay. So this is a good example. Okay. And I've had, I actually have a couple bodybuilders. I probably could name them, but I'm not going to, but they probably wouldn't mind, but I have a couple bodybuilders that have actually left pro bodybuilding. Not because I tried to convince them, but as soon as we started going through the biopsychosocial determinants of their health and their performance, and they've had this heart attack, they've got kids, they're like 39 years old, 36 years old, one's 34, little kids and everything else. Generally what I do is I look at their labs, I look at all their imaging they've had done, all the stress tests and everything. I just say to them, like, okay, so your days are numbered in bodybuilding. Like we're not going to erase the fact that you've got, 70% blockages in your, coronary arteries, but we can, kind of work this so we see how far we can get your labs. And if we can't get them to somewhere where you're like, these are good, then, start mountain biking or doing something that you really enjoy and keep working out. And what ends up happening usually is there's resistance to that. And so they'll say, well, I'm only using like TRT. I'm on 300 milligrams of test. And I'm like, well, we're going to take that down to about 125. And what happens generally is people notice that they actually, with good diet, low stress, and even with the low test, their body gets better. And it's because we take inflammation out and everything else. And over time, what people find is that if they have some sort of injury that's going to be death, mean death for them if they continue, once we get the head thinking right, all of a sudden they remember things that they took out of their life when they started bodybuilding, and everybody knows that. And they start fishing or they'll start camping. And then I start getting pictures of like, oh my God, my physique has never looked this good. And that's because our body responds to stress regardless of whether it's, good or bad stress. It responds to it, and it responds to it in a bad way. So if we can keep stress as low as possible, which is, that whole worry about dying and that we deny, the body starts turning itself around. So, my advice to a lot of those guys, I never ever say, here's what you need to do, right? But rather I say, you got a couple choices. We go down the path that we keep competing. I keep an eye on your blood work. We keep an eye on your calcium score. And, I'm back off if I feel like this is becoming unsafe. And, you've heard me say this before. And so generally a lot of those guys can make a comeback, but as they're going through the process and then they finish the show, we do the bloods, they get a little worse. So generally it's at that point where like, okay, that was going to be my last show. And, all I can do is give them the data and give them the facts. I never make any decisions for anybody. The nice part is I'm a credible source because, I've loved the sport. I spent 30 years, competing and fucking trying to get to 300 pounds and all that stuff. I've got the kidney transplant to prove it. That's my trophy. And, so it's, yeah, I might be 175 pounds now, but it's a good testament of where you're going to end up. And I'm super healthy. My blood work's better than any blood work I see from anybody else. Everything's perfect. And I've got a transplant on board. So you can also come back after, something that you face death in the eyes, but you got to make change, because we can't do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome.
No, for sure. So I guess it's very personal. It's good to know like the risks, like the pros and cons of like if you keep going. And then you said that after every show everything is worse, it can't come back. The baseline is like a little bit higher every time. That's not a good progression. Like, okay, you want to do that 5 more years? Well, every year you're 10% worse. Right. So how many percent do you need to have another heart attack or to die? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess we have seen more bodybuilders died in the recent years, but I think that maybe that's because of social media.
We just know they're there.
And there's people in the general population that also die at 50 from heart attacks, from bad eating. So the thing with bodybuilding is that if you decide to put the same discipline into prepping as it would be to getting healthy, you can get really healthy.
Yeah.
You just
it's funny. It's funny, Antoine, because I always said that the sport that got me to the dialysis unit, the lessons I learned in it were the ones that got me to be a healthy athlete again with a transplant. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, bodybuilding is not evil, right? At all. Bodybuilding is great. How we apply it sometimes can be a little bit, really hard on our bodies. And like I said, the fact that bodybuilding has become a 24/7, 365, because we've got Instagram and everything else that everybody's trying to, look in contest condition, from 17 to 30. That is the, that's what makes it really tough, right? Because back, and you remember these days, back in the 90s, right? It was okay to gain 30, 40, 50 pounds as a open class bodybuilder in the off season. And it was okay to look like puffy and chubby, right? But, like guys I worked out with, like guys like Greg Kovacs and stuff like that bloated, shiny look. I have lots of pictures of me like that. Like that was a thing, right? So it didn't really much matter. Now we have the problem where it's not just, force feeding, but we're also taking a lot of stuff to remain looking really, really, contest ready for our social media. And so it's a year round thing. Like, it's almost like, for a lot of the influencers, it's almost like they're doing a show all the time, because they're not competing, but they're just looking like it. Right. And that's a difference.
Yeah. There's a lot of pressure in the online stuff. So those are like effects if you abuse stuff, but obviously there's the other way around too. So for example, what are the bad effects of low testosterone?
Yeah. So, all right. So we go from like, super physiological to like, we're getting down there. Yeah. The main bad effects really are, going to affect mood, big time, like energy and mood, your confidence, massive. And then weight gain with low testosterone is quite easy, and especially depending on how you get to the low testosterone. So if you're, your balls are responding to LH signals, and LH looks good and everything else, and your testosterone looks pretty good, like things are in pretty good order, you can still have symptoms of hypogonadism. And we have to figure out what that is, right? And a lot of times what happens is in some populations that are overweight, for example, they can get low testosterone because body fat has high aromatase levels. So it breaks down the testosterone, and then we get, sometimes get high estrogens, sometimes we don't. We just get a lot of, total test with very little free test. So not a lot of testosterone doing its job. On the other hand, we can have testicular failure, where the testicles aren't responding to LH and they're producing enough testosterone in response to that. And we can have some pituitary issues where, we're not releasing enough LH even though we have low testosterone. And in all those cases, generally the general, symptoms are going to be depressive symptoms, lack of motivation, lack of, energy, confidence in the down in the tank. When you put all those together, those all then perpetuate a whole bunch of bad eating behaviors and then the lack of movement. And so we get weight gain and inflammation and all these other things. So even just small changes in testosterone levels can make massive changes in behavior. And it's all about behavior, man. You can, other than being a bodybuilder and just following, like a robot, the general population aren't robots like bodybuilders, and they're not getting ready for something. So if they've got low test, we're going to be in a lot of trouble because it's hard to get them to the place they want to be. If you've got a bodybuilder with low test, generally speaking, then they'll bump it back up anyway. So I'm a firm believer in TRT, supportive believer in TRT. I play around with it myself with my kidney transplant. And I've found that if I use more than 150 milligrams a week, I start seeing big changes in my kidney function and everything else, because it starts driving protein synthesis a little hard. But I find that if I use 12 and a half, milligrams a day, which is like, 87 and a half milligrams a week or something. All I feel is the good effects of it without any sort of, ball shrinkage, water retention, or anything. I get the confidence boost, recovery's better, and everything else. So really, the testosterone thing, I love the fact that we've got the access now to being able to kind of, optimize, if you will, our testosterone, because it's going to make a massive difference in all the rest of the parts of your life that you're trying to push the needle in. And that's up here.
Mm-hmm. Very true. So that's cool, I guess. And also, if you have low testosterone, you won't have like that much maybe good boners.
Well, obviously your sex life goes into it, but you know what's funny? I've had I've never ever done like PCT. And this is back when you actually went off stuff, right? And I've never had any issue with sexual performance other than, load volume and all those kind of things when my testosterone was low. So even the boners and sex drive thing, absolutely it goes up. I get more boners, and, I make sure that I take care of those boners more often. But some people actually have perfectly optimized testosterone, and because there's psychological issues, they have issues with, even getting turned on or getting a boner. And that could be a number of different things too, with blood flow and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, testosterone, we got to get it in check. If we're taking TRT, and we're getting older in age, we got to make sure that we're getting our PSA measured. So prostate specific antigens, so that we're not driving prostate issues, prostate cancer and whatnot. And a lot of times people are doing TRT, kind of off script, right? So getting it from their buddy. So in those populations, that's one thing I really, really recommend is, you do all the blood work for your cardiovascular, like we mentioned, but throw PSA in there at least once a year to make sure that we're not having any issues with the prostate, because yeah.
I did the PSA. There's a free form and there's a total PSA. Is that what it is? So I did the two of the test, because sometimes when I was peeing, it would take 2 seconds before I would pee. And I was like, why is it doing that? So then I was reading on all these things on ChatGPT about inflamed prostate. Oh my God, do I have cancer? Do I have a benign thing? Do I have the prostatitis or whatever it is that's just inflamed? And so I did the 2 PSA tests, and they're both fine. Can you have inflamed prostate without high PSA levels?
Sort of. Yeah. So you can have benign prostate hyperplasia, like BPH. So it just kind of grows and it's benign, doesn't really mean anything. It's swollen. But most times, so this is what, okay. So I've experienced this too. And so here's a couple questions for you. First of all, have you ever noticed when you're having trouble with the peeing stuff, or, it's delayed or whatever, stream's not as strong? Do you ever get one of your nuts that are kind of pulled up? It wants to stay up, and the cord on it's ever swollen? Do you ever get that?
It doesn't stay up or
Okay.
something, but
Okay. So
no.
that's the first question, because that's called varicocele, and that happens actually quite a bit when you ejaculate a lot, right? So if you are on TRT and it increases your sex drive, and you're busting a nut 2 or 3 times a day, or even once every day over time, what happens is there's a muscle, okay, and let's just call it, for your audience, the cum muscle, and you know what I'm talking about, right in your taint, right? It
Yeah,
pulses, okay,
yeah,
that
yeah.
actually can get developed. And when it gets developed, it
You got to
becomes
pump.
hyper sensitive. And the reason why I know this is because when I have a kidney transplant, and the freaking 18-year-old nurse, well, she wasn't 18, but she looked 18, 26-year-old nurse was jamming the freaking camera up the end of my 2-inch penis like a tube of toothpaste. Yeah.
Ouch.
When they went to go into the prostate, like there's this muscle, this kind of sphincter, right? That goes like this.
Yeah.
I asked them to say, hey, take a look at my prostate while you're in there. They're actually pulling out the stent they put in between my bladder and the new kidney. So they went in,
Hmm.
and you could see the muscle. And he goes, you see this? He goes, you don't have prostate issues. He goes, look at how strong this muscle is. And it looked like your asshole. Like, look at and
Oh, really?
it's open
Wow.
like this. He goes, put the camera in. He goes, it just clamps down on it. Yeah, and he goes, check that. He goes, that's the most developed perineum I've ever seen in my life. And
Whoa.
so here we go, right? I think maybe you might have a developed, your cremaster or something might be a little.
I have a jack taint. Is that
You
what
have
you're
a jack
saying?
taint. Yeah, yeah. It's a
Oh,
muscle
that's
if you
funny.
train it
Yeah,
enough.
well, yeah, that's true. But I think I did the right thing getting some blood work done for it, though. And that's the cool thing now is that it can become easier to do blood work. I know, like if you're American, you can use Live Forever Health. It's actually one of my sponsors in the link in the description. They will do all the blood work for you, and there's doctors and nurses that can help you in the United States for that. So that's pretty cool. They will even prescribe for you, send you to the testosterone in the mail. So the U.S. got it pretty down, like for as far as that. So Live Forever Health is a great company for that. In Canada, so my friend is using this app. Oh, man, what is it? It's an app that like they will. It costs $100 because he's from Quebec. It costs $100. You get a full panel, and that's a requisition you can go to the lab with, and they will keep track of all your markers on the app. I forgot what the app is, but if you're interested, Dwayne, I could ask him
Yeah,
for you because that would be something you could have. Like you could have all the stuff, like all your clients lined up, and maybe you get a kickback
that'd
too.
be lovely. Yeah,
Because
share that with me, Antoine. I don't know
yeah,
what that is. But for your
yeah.
for your listenership, so there's a couple of ways I go about this. Because I'm out in BC and I'm trying to help people. I help most of my clients are in America anyway. But my Canadians, it's cool because I get them to go across the border if they're along the southern part of the country. So here I get them to go across to Seattle, so they can basically go on Merrick Health or to your company, get a rec,
Yeah.
cross the border, like, so it gets mailed to them. They cross the border and they just go to a Life Labs or Quest or whatever's in that particular state. And that works really, really well if they're close enough to a border, and if they're really having trouble. The other beautiful resource for those people that don't have a primary care physician that's going to give them something, or they just don't have one at all, is to see a naturopath, because naturopaths can give blood requisitions too. And a
Oh,
lot of people don't know this, and especially in Quebec, there's a lot of naturopaths. There really is.
yeah, I know.
So you can use that resource to get at what you need too, and it's like $125, $150, you get a rack. They're going to try and
Hmm.
sell you passion fruit, tinctures for your forehead, but just kidding to my naturopath friends. But other than that, you know what I mean, you're still going to get your rack, and then you get someone like me to go through it, or if you're educated enough to kind of connect the dots, away you go.
That's good. Yeah, because it's kind of hard for like, let's say if you're like in your 20s, you have a general doctor, you go see him. I want a full panel. They'll say, why?
Well,
I want to see if I'm healthy. So you can't. It's like they make it hard for you to like check your health sometimes.
Yeah, and you want out, their hands are tied. You know, the beauty of working with me is, you know, or speaking with me is I can have my feet on both sides. And so I've trained thousands of physicians, being, you know, a past medical professor and medical scientist. And their hands are tied because, first of all, there is a flow chart for everything in medicine. That's why, you know, I never ended up in a doctor's office working, because it was I'm not a flow chart guy. And so there's a flow chart for everything.
What's
Oh, sorry.
what's flow
There's
chart?
an order of operations for every single thing you
Okay.
do. So if you come in, say, for example, depending on the province or whatever that you go in, even this happens in the States too. Say you say, you know, I have these symptoms of low thyroid. Okay. The average doc has been instructed to measure TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, first. Okay. They measure it, you wait, you go get it. So you go in, you get your blood, you wait, you have an appointment with your doctor 3 weeks later. They go, yep, TSH is high. We better look at T3 and T4. And then they go in and they look at T3 and T4, and they'll look at total. And then if they're anomalous, then they'll dig a little deeper to say, okay, this could be, we should probably look at free T3 and free T4. Now, some docs will order that whole panel in one time. But the actual reason why they do that, partially anyway, is because doctors are not paid very, very well for the amount of stuff they have to do. They're also, and because of that, they don't have the time to sit in the office and explain, here's what you need to do to fix this situation. You know, they don't have an hour to do that, because they have to double book. And that's why when you get there, you know, they're an hour late for your appointment, everything, because they're trying to hustle just like all of us, right? And so there's that, right? And then mounted on top of that is a massive ego. And this isn't every physician, but it is something that's trained in the medical system. And so what ends up happening there is, if you come in and say, well, I want my, you know, lipoprotein A measured, and they don't really know what that is, or, you know,
They forgot or
whatever,
something.
right? And
Yeah.
they say, why do you want that measured? And you actually answer it intelligibly. There's a chance they could get flared and frustrated. You know, you don't need that. We don't need that right now. And the reason, again, the reason why is because if you can get 3 appointments for the price of, you know, 1, like, you know, you get 3 appointments for the price of 3 to cover what you cover in 1. That's gonna be better.
Yeah, because they could just do like, instead of like checking one thing, let's check everything, see what's
Right.
fucked
And so
up.
what ends up
And then
happening there, man, is like, so say you're going to walk in and they do that, they have to treat all the shit that they see come by. So if you're a bodybuilder and you're looking a little unhealthy, which I know sounds contrary, by the way, to what should happen, then they want to do this incrementally, because if you end up with, for example, oh, it looks like he has kidney disease, liver disease, and heart disease, right? That becomes a massive mess to deal with, especially if you're walking,
because they have, because
walking
the government,
clinic.
because the gov, I know. Is it because the government has to pay for it? So it's like they'd rather treat one little thing at a time than to spend money
No,
on a lot
not
of
at all.
people?
Not
Or
at all. In fact, it has more to do with the actual time it takes for them to get at that. And they just don't have, like, there's just not a lot of time for physicians to deal with the amount of people that need their service. And there's not enough physicians to deal with the amount of people that need their service. So physicians are overworked. And when we're overworked and underpaid, then, you know, and I mean, I know a lot of your listenership, they're not fucking underpaid. Well, physicians don't make what everybody thinks they do. They don't make what, you know, entrepreneurs make and everything else, you know, doing their job. So, you know, there are amazing physicians out there. There are very good ones that are more than willing to go the extra mile. But the problem is right now is there's a shift toward that. And so it's hit and miss. So if you get a doctor that's, you know, 55 to 60 years old, and he's been in the trenches for, you know, 30 or probably, you know, 15, 20 years, they're going to have a different philosophy than the new docs that are pumping out over the last 5 or 6 years. And so there's a time lag between the generations. And right now we're seeing a generational change where the millennials and even the Gen Zs, right, are starting to get into the stream of medicine. And so now we're getting a softer approach. So you see guys like Kyle Gillette online, Dr. Kyle Gillette, amazing doc, unbelievable, goes through everything. He's awesome. You see all these concierge docs that are out there. That's because they're escaping the system. So we have a number of docs that you can pay privately to handle all your bloods and do everything, right? That's because they've realized the system limits their ability to do the job that they like to do best. And so
like which is a heel
absolutely.
People,
and when
your
hands are tied, you kind of become jaded by the system. So my advice, your doctor, think of your doctor as a toolbox. See that toolbox behind me right there? Okay. So yeah, and I don't even like that toolbox that much, but I bought it for me. I like it because of that, but it's like, kind of disorganized and whatever. But what I do know is it's full of tools. And so I don't throw that toolbox out, because I don't like how disorganized it is. I just accept the fact that when I'm looking for a fucking screwdriver, it's going to take me 5 minutes, but it has a screwdriver in it. So your doctor is a toolbox.
That's disorganized.
Has, a good system. And I mean, sorry for the docs out there, but I'm supporting them here. So it's like a toolbox. And if you don't like them personally, you don't have to. There's no personal thing about this. You want data. And if they'll give you limited data, don't fight them for it because they won't give you any data. They don't have to. There's no obligation to deal with someone that's pissed off. So you're way better off going in and just being like, what I said, like grin fuck them and just be as nice as you possibly can to get the tool you need. Because all you do is get it out of there and then you contact someone like me and I can take a look at everything and be like, oh yeah, here's what you need to do and do this, that, and the other thing. And that's why, that's where the power is and what I do, because I can straddle these different, I can talk to the doc, I can talk their language, I can talk bodybuilder, I can talk whatever.
Yeah. You're like
the middle. I'm like the middleman. I'm the street dealer.
Yeah, foot in both worlds. Okay, now let's go through some interesting questions here to finish the podcast. So, with the increasing use of AI in diagnosis and treatment, do you think doctors are at risk of losing their ethical judgment to algorithms?
Ooh, ethical judgment. Yeah. So, great question. So I was an early adopter to AI and machine learning. That's actually what I did for my work when I was, in research, looking at vascular systems and whatnot. So I love AI. I love the power of it. I know how to program it. I use MATLAB most of the time for trying to get my machine learning programs going. So I'm loving what's coming out. In terms of, if physicians are using AI on just like, let her rip and take the answer that comes out. Yeah, they're running some risks on things, but it's actually ethically. I mean, physicians use the Merck manual and the physician's desk reference to, diagnose and treat. It's, they can't memorize every single thing on earth. We know, generally speaking, they know all the things that are common, but sometimes you have to go into those reference manuals to say like, oh, does this lesion on the skin have a rounded corners or does it have jagged corners? Because that makes the difference between it being two different things. So they have to do that anyway. So the way where AI can be a problem currently is that the models have to be refined because just like my models that I created for AI for my vascular stuff, if you're trying to predict something or you're trying to answer a question from a whole bunch of data, it depends on the quality of the data that come in, that how smart the machine is. So ChatGPT, if you don't put constraints on the search variables and how it uses the data, then you're letting it just kind of go out there and grab. And
you grab stuff from Twitter, Reddit, and the medical thing. But if you so it's pretty much when you prompt it, say within all the medical studies that have been certified by whatever universities, if these are the symptoms, what could be the problem? So you have to kind of make a bigger
right.
prompt.
But where the problem with that is, and I've seen this a few times, is if you ask for the references, because you probably should, you click them and you're freaking looking at them and they don't exist or they're wrong. They're not even fucking.
No, yeah, I've heard about that actually. Yeah.
So for me, I love AI. I've been trying to make my own GPTs now to try and get get it wrangled into actual real information. But yeah, any physician that just takes it at face value is kind of. However, here's what's cool about AI right now. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do. AI is awesome for getting your shit organized in your head. So if it's health, if you're like, what, I have these 5 symptoms, and it comes up with a laundry list of things that you may have. The nice part about that is you can then take that laundry list and do your own, search on PubMed or, credible sources to see, what that means and if that is actually what you're experiencing. That's cool. The other one is, it can give you the, on a whole other level, you can ask it to design you design me a 30-minute interactive workshop for 100 people on fat loss, and it will give you at least an awesome set of ideas to then build from for your talk.
Yeah, that's at least the
Oh, it's
structure.
wicked. And for anything you can build structure from, right? And including like how healthy am I? Another one is you can actually you can take your labs and put them right into Chat GPT and say interpret these, right? And then does that take away my job? Absolutely not, because the actual there's an art in understanding how to connect the dots. And you and I've talked about that. We got low B12, but we're getting a lot of B12 in our diet. Homocysteine's up, gut health's off. Let's get on some probiotics. Let's fix this up some fiber. Test again. Perfect. We're back in business. Let's keep on going, right? That art doesn't exist yet, but it will. It will. Because machine learning right now isn't learning. ChatGPT is not really learning. It's going out and it's assimilating and creating an answer. But the minute that we can get it to learn, which is what I was doing when I was in medical biophysics, that's the key. And that's what scares everybody, because now it's taking in good data, hopefully, right? And it's answering questions. So like it creates meta-analyses, right? Like instantly. Awesome.
Yeah, because I don't know where I heard that, but maybe it was a podcast. I don't remember, but I read that or heard that there was this little girl or a woman or the girl's daughter, whatever. She went through like 5 different doctors. They couldn't find like what was wrong with her with the symptoms, and then she just put the symptoms in ChatGPT, and then they found exactly what it was within like a minute. Right. So sometimes it can happen. So I'm wondering if at some point you won't need maybe as many doctors. Because say like there's missing physicians, right? What if you could just like go to a place, you put all your symptoms, and then you get like what it is, and then you get like right away a prescription.
Yes. So, and I mean, we're real close. And like what you just mentioned with that girl, that's what I meant by that. Like you can end up with like a list of things, and it's like, oh, well, my doctor already tested for A, B, C, D, but this one here, says it's really rare, but maybe we should test for that. Right. That's powerful as hell, because you're right. Like, I mean, specialists, physicians, they only can diagnose based on the experience they have. That's why there's a nice sweet spot in there around my age, 50, 55, where they've had lots of experience, but they're not quite old fuckers. And so they're not irrelevant yet. I'm just trying to support myself here. But no, but the point is, you have these people that actually can, make decisions and do it nicely. And that, those people, if they use these GPTs and ran them and were able to pick through the ones and say, oh, this is great, I see this, new thing, right? And they're willing to accept learning and everything else, that's a powerful doc. ChatGPT, all the GPTs are very, very powerful tools. They're one of those things where it's like, you can know enough to get into trouble. But when we will get to a point where you will be able to do like telehealth and telemedicine and all those things through GPTs. There's no question whatsoever. What we have to do though is make sure that, and these are being developed, that we can constrain the data flow so that the information that's coming to it is real or is truthful. And that is the beauty of it, because you can feed the machine, right? And when you feed it and it learns through machine learning, then it can make decisions and problem solving, right? So then it can search GPTs and do that, but then pull out it gets so freaking powerful. It's unbelievable.
So, yeah, but what about if there's and let's say, oh no, the government is behind this new AI that's going to be medicinal, and then who's giving money to the government? Pharmaceutical industries. So what if, like you say, somebody would have to say what's true or not, or who the fuck will decide what's true or not? And if they're like they're lobbied and they're giving like compensation from these giant companies, or just money for it to happen, whatever, right? Then it's like, oh man, it will be tainted again by the human greed
Right.
and error.
So your first
So
assumption though is that there's a conspiracy that we fucking feed pharma. So that's the first assumption, which okay. So in the States, you know, in the US, you can make that assumption and you can try to like maneuver it and be relatively, you know, you can create a story pretty good. The problem in Canada is fucking medicine's not profitable. We pay it through our taxes. We're not our our doctors aren't making shit. They get to go to Hawaii if they choose between, you know, Advil as an ibuprofen or a generic, right? You know, so like, you know, Advil might go, hey, you know, we want you to come to a big seminar thing for continuing medical education in Hawaii for 3 weeks and whatever. You know, that's a wine and dine type thing more than anything, but you get continuing medical education. But the thing is, they're more making you choose brand, like their brand, than anything else. There's no like, you know, we got this new secret drug that hasn't been really tested, so we want you to push it. The disconnect in this is that big pharma, the reason why big pharma is big pharma and makes big cash is because they make big leaps to save lives and they pay the best scientists in the world to work on them. So let's break it down real quick. The scientist that's working on this stuff, the actual person who's developing the technology and everything else, they're a scientist. They're like I was. They're just fucking, they want to cure things and that. They're not entrepreneurs. They wouldn't be fucking working for the company if they were an entrepreneur. So they've got no stock in Pfizer or anything like that, right? So they're just in there toiling away like a geeky little, you know, like I'd be in the lab doing my thing, creating drugs that work. And then they undergo clinical trials. And those clinical trials have to go through 3 phases, you know, preclinical and then a clinical trial. So phase 1, phase 2, where you can only test the drug in people that no other treatment works for the disease that you're testing. Okay. So they're going to die anyway. And then those are those clinical trials that people get these miraculous outcomes from once in a while. You know, I want to be part of a study. And then 3rd phase is in, you know, relatively healthy people, right? And phase 3 clinical trials, you know, when I was doing them, failure rate was around 90 to 98%. By the time you go through a phase 3, it's millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to get there, right? So the money in big pharma is there to have the best of the best working for it. The example is, if I didn't believe in big pharma, I'd be dead right now because I take a handful of pills at 8:30 every morning and at 8:30 every night. And those are the immunosuppressants that allow me to have my kidney on board. So, you know, it's not inherently evil. There are, obviously, we live in a capitalist society and you're capitalizing and I'm capitalizing and we're using this podcast to make fucking money. And, you know, we can't kid ourselves that everything we do is going to be some sort of like, you know, self-serving endeavor. So big pharma as an entity, you know, the people of the CEOs might be evil, but the actual mandate to create drugs has to be profitable so that they can pay the people to get the drugs made. And so not big on like, oh, just everybody taking drugs. Drugs should be there to fix something or at least get someone into an unfucked condition until we get it out of it.
a need. It's a need. It's the demand and
Supply and
what's it
demand.
called? Demand and
Yeah.
supply and demand. So, do you believe that this happened before, where there was a product by a big pharma that was pushed out there because mainly the first reason was to make profit, and then turned out that it wasn't that good to push that product. It was been a mistake, but they wanted to make money and they knew and didn't care. Do you think it happened before?
So there have been lots of products put on the market that end up having side effects that were either unknown or known. But there are drugs out there, yeah, like thalidomide is one of them, right? And it was for mothers that had, like, morning sickness and all these kind of things. And then, it caused genetic mutations where limbs didn't develop on the babies, and these kids without arms and legs, or one arm and one leg, or short arms. And that's a perfect example of it. Now, did it treat what they tried to do? Yeah, absolutely. But the problem was they ended up with these disorders. And so, absolutely, I mean, drugs aren't perfect. Nothing's really perfect. But if the mandate to push drugs out there to make money, right? They're not out there to do harm, right? The harm that happens as a collateral damage is something different. But there are like way ups, right? Okay, so this drug causes such and such in 1% of those that use it, for example, right? And then all of a sudden now we have a pandemic of some sort, and that drug has to be put out to 300 million people. Well, the chances of finding side effects now are going to be massive. If we make that a worldwide study, so multi-centered, like the best clinical trial in the world, we're going to find, even if it's 1%, a lot of people are going to have the problem. So, this is what happens when we have pandemics and this kind of stuff, because what they have to weigh up is, can we control things enough that less people perish overall in the situation? And there's a lot more behind the scenes that happens with it. But at the same time, are there evil people that, are, running some of these companies and whatnot? Absolutely. The CEOs and whatnot that run a lot of companies have one thing on their mind, right? Right. Money. But they've capitalized on an industry that people need. Like, so if you just burned all the big pharma down right now, like just burn her all down around North America, boy, oh boy, a lot of our friends would be dead. And boy, oh boy, would there ever be a lot of people that, are going to die. So it's, it's not perfect by any means. It's actually not even like a great thing right now. I can't bitch about it because, first of all, our healthcare system probably has about $1 million into me with this transplant on board. Thank God I pay a lot of taxes. Number two, if it wasn't for multiple different drug companies that make all these freaking drugs that I take to make my kidney stay on board. Yeah. Here's the thing though, Antoine, I will have cancer. Like, I will get cancer from these drugs. These drugs are like highly, highly carcinogenic, right?
Oh, because they just kill all the thing
Well,
that
they
would fight off
slow
the
down
kidney.
cell division,
So
basically, right? So mTOR inhibitors, right?
okay.
So I'm trying to train them on an mTOR inhibitor. So protein synthesis is down, and so they stop the cell cycling. So the cells get old, the DNA get kind of messed up in their copying, and so skin cancer is really big in my cohort. But if I have anything brewing, it will take hold, right? Now, does that mean that big pharma fucked me because I had this cancer that was caused by these drugs? Not really.
It's either that or you were dying.
So I mean, it right. So it's like, we have to weigh it up. So if we fuck ourselves up, we're always going to run to medicine anyway. So, if we have a kind of a tainted view on the medical community, that's totally fine, right? Like, it's, trust me, I don't trust every doctor I go to. But they are a toolbox and they are a portal to testing and medications and whatnot. And to be honest, most of the people that are on here, and most of the guys we know and everything like that, like they trust the little pharma much more than they trust big pharma, which is kind of irony, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's funny. I've read. Have you seen the message that Facebook, like Mark Zuckerberg, sent out and said that he kind of like admitted that they were modifying and censoring like anti-vaccine things, and then he was regretting it. Went back on that, and also with colluding with the elections. He kind of admitted there was a letter that he put out, and it said that, and then so it's pretty weird, like that he would admit that, because I think he was maybe put in a corner or something. And then I've also like seen a few things about like how like people are going back on what they're saying, because during the pandemic they were saying, they were like, this is the truth, this is that, and then now it's like the same people like, yeah, maybe it wasn't. So they're going back on it. So I guess the urgency of things made a lot more mistakes that happened before, and then companies, with some of them having the intent to make money off a certain
Yeah, so
situation,
there was
like
profiteering for sure.
creating
There's
more mistakes.
profiteering, absolutely, but the technology wasn't rushed. I mean, I had
Yeah.
friends working on these RNA vaccines like 10, 15 years ago. Um, the biggest the biggest thing is that you have a pandemic and the world's in it, right? And we don't want
Mhm.
another black plague or another like that kind of stuff. We don't want just like millions of people just to die at one time and drop dead. And so the approach and everything else was ruled out quickly, absolutely, justifiably, under the laws and conventions of the governments that run the world. But where the problem is that once you get it out there and you get time behind it, that's when you can start seeing the actual true effects, right? Or the side effects. That's what I meant by,
Hmm.
you throw it out to the major population. Now, if you have 99% effective without side effects, right? That 1% is a massive number when we're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of people. And so, yeah, we start seeing things like I had side effects because of the kidney transplant meds, and I had to take didn't have to, but I was taking the vaccine. I took, I think 6, but the problem was the last 2 gave me clots in this arm, right? And do you remember when I was working out that one day? I go check it how pumped I am up here, and my arm was like
Oh
that big.
yeah. What the fuck
Yeah,
was that?
yeah. So my arm clotted and it
Yeah.
filled full of blood and it wouldn't empty. And so I stopped
Oh
taking
shit.
the vaccine because I was having a side effect. No one else in my family had those side effects, right? So I could walk around bitching and say there's a big conspiracy. They want to fucking have my arm cut off or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
now it's kind of screwed. Like it had to create collateral vessels, so it looks kind of freaky. But the point is
Mhm.
that I I I don't think when you look at it as a whole, it looks inherently evil, right? You're like, oh, everybody's part of this conspiracy, but like if there's any conspiracy players, they're the money guys sitting at the very top in the boardrooms that have
Yeah. At the top.
nothing to do with the science. Nothing. All they care about is the bottom
Yeah.
end, for sure.
No, the scientists just want to make science. It's like when the Americans took all the Nazis who were the rocket scientists and just brought them to the States, and it was like they were like, "Yeah, I don't care who's my boss. I just want to make cool
Right.
projects, pretty
Yeah,
much."
exactly.
You
Well,
know.
and that's what it is, right? Like,
So I
so
think,
for me, like,
yeah,
I was into developing these really cool vascular surgeries. And did I use them on a human? No, I didn't. I did them in live animals, as a phase 1 trial. Now my surgeries that I've developed in these really like tiny vessels, like 1/5 of the thickness if you had hair, 1/5 thick.
mm,
Yeah, like we're talking like
really,
8 to 10 microns wide. Um, they're being used now in trying to graft vessels in different areas and try to grow angiogenic vessels in different things that grow nerves. And so that stuff gets applied right down the line. And so when you have a scientist working on a project, like they want it to work because that's how they get paid and they get their funding.
yeah,
They can't fake it because it's peer reviewed so deeply and it's all anonymous, right? And remember, it's peer reviewed by other scientists doing the similar things. So if anything, they're going to say this is shit, right? They're not going to say like, oh, rah, 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 let's make some money off this because no one makes money off publications. All the people that are working on the same technology, they would consider it being scooped. That's the word for, shit. This guy got a paper out before me on this. So to be honest, the peer review process in academic medicine, in academic research is really rigorous. And if people are publishing in shitty journal, that's a different story. But the stuff that we're talking about is published in like high quality journals like Nature, Science, PNAS. And these are just like, hard places to get your work adjudicated. So it's, the medical thing we have right now is really interesting. In light of everything we've talked about today, bodybuilders are going to need doctors, right? Like that's all there is to it. It's part of their freaking pit crew. So you don't have to be on, you don't have to be aligned with, the philosophies of medicine. You don't have to be aligned with, whether it's whether they're profiteering or not. But what you do have to be aligned with is I'm going to need a doctor for testing, for interpretation of testing, for prescribing and everything else. Because really at the end of the day, your online, when you go into the human grade section, doesn't always have all the stuff that you want to have. right?
No, for sure. Yeah, no, we need the doctors more than any other coach, in my opinion, right? Because if I would have to remove like one professional from my pit crew, like you said, I mean, I don't need a trainer. A coach, yeah, I like it when I prep, so I have a better eye. But I know enough myself that I could probably do a good job. But I don't want to remove the doctor that's gonna teach me about health and remove. So I think it's like if you have to choose one to keep, probably be the doctor because you need the prescriptions, you need the blood work requisition, you need all this stuff. Well, for me at least. I mean, if a guy just wants to win, doesn't care about dying,
Yeah,
yes, he gets a
you know
coach,
what the
of
problem
course.
is with that though
But
is that like healthy bodies are what are going to win. Like at the end of the day, you might win one
function better,
show, you might
yeah.
even win like in a fucking Olympia unhealthy, but you're not gonna have 20 titles, like like you're not gonna have 5 titles.
No,
So
no, for sure. Okay, so I got one more question here that's a little bit controversial still, but it applies also to me right now. So with the vaccination controversies, there's people who are like against some of them because then people are for some of them, and then there's also like some of them are bad, some of them are not needed, and some of them are needed. But because I have a kid
mhm.
on the way, right? I mean, there's things that he needs to have, and we have two midwives helping us, which is really cool because they really take their time. We meet them every 2 weeks because if you have just a
OBGYN, yeah.
OBYJ, what's a OBGYN doctor, it will be like on a Zoom call, 5 minutes, and then bing bang, because he's on the time limit, like you said earlier, right? But with the midwives, they advocate for the baby and the mother,
And you
and
get a
it's
private
been really
birthing
cool.
suite
So,
and
any
everything else,
questions
which is really nice.
eh, yeah, yeah, I'm gonna, yeah, we're gonna have a private place to birth, and then I'm gonna rent a private room
Yeah.
afterwards for the 48 hours or something. But yeah, but they usually answer all the questions, but they just tell you like pros and cons, and then give you the option, and then like we end up deciding. So it's like we after having all the answers. But so is there anything that like maybe a baby should for sure have from your experience, and some things that are not
Yeah.
needed at
So
all?
and again, like, to each their own, like, do your thing. I love everybody. I have no biases at all. I just go by the data. So, yes, you got to get the polio, you got to get the MMR, like measles, mumps, and rubella. You have to get the basic ones that we've been getting forever, because here's the problem. All of these archaic fucking diseases are coming back now. Mumps are all over the place. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
they
Oh
are.
yeah. Measles, German measles making a comeback. And then polio has made a comeback. There's kids, like, I had kids when I was in public school when I was young, wearing braces. There's two kids in my school and on their legs because they had polio. And I remember thinking to myself, like, God, what the hell is that? And then, the polio vaccine was out and everything else. So to be honest, like, the reoccurrence of archaic first world diseases that we shouldn't see in North America making a comeback tells us that it's probably a good idea to get those basic measures. Measles, mumps, rubella, absolutely. Like, you don't want to have measles.
What about the
Whooping
whooping
cough's another
cough is really
one,
bad
and
for
there's no,
babies?
like, we don't see any issues on a general basis for those. The what and of course you have the option to decide, right? The problem is
Yeah.
that most daycares aren't going to take you if you're going to be carrying the old whooping cough and the old measles and mumps and all that stuff, because they don't want to have an outbreak. So most times you need vaccination certificates. Schools generally, I don't know what they are now, but generally like to know the immunization status of your kids, because we're in a population. We are a community. It's actually funny we're bringing it back to that. And so sometimes there is a commitment we have to make to our community also, that's beyond just our personal thoughts about whether this is safe or not. These vaccines have been deemed safe for forever. Um,
Yeah, because they are vaccines that are like really safe and really needed, and there are some that are like
well,
flu
a flu
shot,
shot's not
like
dangerous in it by any means, but it's really hit and miss.
but
Like
it's
like we don't
yeah,
know. They use
yeah,
modeling to try and figure out which influenza virus is going to be around this year. Sometimes they'll hit it and they'll be like, oh, we're going to get 30% of the cases. Other times it's like, yeah, we didn't even touch it. I'm supposed to with my, so this is a great, actually, Antoine, this is a great example. Okay. I have only probably had 2 flu shots in my life. I'm supposed to have the flu shot because of my immunosuppression. And I'm also supposed to have the COVID shot, right? Now, am I against the COVID-19 vaccine? Absolutely not. But I had a side effect that was, and it recurred twice. I know now that I clot, and I already have that because I know that because of the drugs I'm on for my kidney. So I don't do any more of those. In terms of the flu shot, I don't do it either, mainly because it's just inconvenience and they can't convince me enough that it's going to actually catch the flu. So I do other countermeasures to make sure I don't catch the flu. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Vitamin D and just healthy. And another question. So when you had your daughter, right? So how long did you wait for letting other people hold her or give her kisses? Because now, like, if we're reading online and stuff, like, people are like very protective, to say the least, of their babies because their immune system are like really super low for like 4 months or something. So, what's your take on that? Like, how paranoid should I be?
Don't be paranoid. So we develop our immunity during that period, right? So, and all of our gut health and everything relies on all this, shit we deal with. So, our first hit of bacteria is going to be either coming out of the vagina, right? Or out of, a C-section. So we'll either get a skin microbiome all over the face of the baby, or we'll get that vagina, right? And funny enough, the vagina actually has a lot of commensal bacteria that are really good for the baby, right? Now, not everybody can have a vaginal birth, and there's some data that show us actually we get our first inoculation of bacteria inside the mother, in the womb, right? So then the next one's going to be, the hugs and kisses and all that stuff, and breast milk. And then on the skin, there's going to be lots of bacteria there too. Like, you're not taking an alcohol swab and cleaning her all off. And then in the milk itself, it's full of bacteria. So the key is, we start with a pretty blank slate for our bacterial load in our digestive system and throughout our body. Actually, like, we have microbiomes all over ourselves. So being exposed to bacteria is great. Being exposed to viruses is bad. And so anybody that wants to, kiss and hug your baby with COVID, whether you believe in COVID or not, it ain't good for babies. So your child will get sick a lot, and your household will be sick a lot, especially if they're in daycare and, everything else. If they're not in daycare and then you get them into public school, right, into kindergarten, that kind of stuff, they're going to get sick a lot because they're building their immunity. And so we have to expect our children to actually have sniffly noses a lot of the time. And any parents on here are going, oh yeah, fuck, it's horrible. It happens too till they're about 5 or 6 years old. Like, super common. And then by the time they're 10, they've developed a pretty good immunity to most of the stuff that we have. And as long as they haven't been given antibiotics and all those kind of things to wipe out all that bacteria. And some kids have to have that, right? It's necessary. But as long as we've had a nice clean bacterial load, so we're 10 or so, gut health usually is good. Immune system's nice and strong and robust, so we don't catch every cold out there. But you're going to expect your kid to get sick.
So what would you do to avoid viruses the first few fragile months?
Hang around people that have common courtesy. Like, basically, you're not going to have to worry about having the virus and giving it to your kid because you're going to be like, screw this, I'm not going to be around, right? But usually symptomatic viruses are the ones that are catchy, right? So we're talking about colds and flus and all these kind of things. Those people are symptomatic, and that's how people get it. So just, if your friends and stuff are sniffly and whatnot, just don't hang around them that day. But your kid's going to be more people are not going to want to hang around you because your kid's going to be sniffly than people coming by that are sick.
Okay. But for example, like, did you have people over the first month?
Yeah. Like the first day we got to the hospital, we had like a party with all our family at the house.
And then
nothing bad will happen. Then there's going to be baby showers, and the baby's going to get passed around to everybody in the room and everything else. No, it's all good. Let them eat dirt. Let them play with worms. Let them have dirty hands when they eat. Really, at the end of the day, you're just building their immune system. You don't want to have COVID parties and throw them in a room full of kids with COVID. You don't want to have chickenpox parties.
No.
Hopefully they don't get chickenpox. There's vaccines.
Oh, you like purposely
Oh, yeah.
putting sick kids together?
Like,
Yeah.
well, it's funny because
yeah, I've heard
in
of
the
that.
70s, if that was a thing for chickenpox, it was like, well, you're going to get it anyway, so let's get it fucking over with. So, you know, all the kids would be playing with kids with chickenpox, right?
Oh God, yeah.
They do.
They
I
have a
know. And
vaccine
that's
for that now,
get
actually.
it, because here's the thing: chickenpox becomes friggin' shingles down the road, and shingles are horrible.
Oh.
And if you get them on your face, you're gonna have to get plastic surgery to fix the big divot holes in your face that you get from it. Get it in your eye.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
So it's
Okay.
you know, down the road, it's really nice not to have had chickenpox, because that virus just stays sitting in your cell bodies and it pops out when we get really stressed when we get older. Mm.
Oh really? So you need because I had chickenpox when I was a kid, so I guess I'm
Well,
immune.
no. So what happens is the virus then just kind of sits dormant, and you'll end up eventually, you know, if you're immunosuppressed in whatever way, whether it's, you know, from sickness and tiredness or from, you know, horrible organ transplants. But the point is that eventually
Yeah.
most people will have a shingles bout sometime in their life if they've had that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh really? So you would get that for the
Well, for the kids, absolutely. I mean,
chickenpox
there's no sense
vaccine
in having shingles come in on the
for the
scene. You
kids,
know,
yeah.
if they have a propensity to get it, it's just not worth it. And it's a pretty good vaccine.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty much don't avoid bacteria, but try to avoid viruses from people
Absolutely.
who
But
have
again,
symptoms.
you're not gonna totally get around it. Your kid's gonna have cold after cold after cold after cold, snotty nose, wiping it all over everything, sucking on toys. Like, oh yeah, it's it's a roller coaster.
Because I heard if the baby has a virus, he has a fever, as a newborn, you have to bring it to the hospital. They're gonna have spinal
Well,
taps
if
and
the
stuff. Is
fever
that
is
true?
uncontrollable, and yeah, yeah,
It's
babies
uncontrollable.
are
Yeah.
highly resistant individuals. Unfortunately, they can't, you know, survive on their own, so we're not that evolved.
Hmm.
But they are highly
Yeah.
resistant. So you know, nice and pink inside. They're you know, they can create fever really well because they need that, because their immune system isn't, you know, really robust yet to try and fight things. That heat.
So they need that to
Yeah,
burn off
yeah.
the virus. Okay, yes, kill the virus. Gotcha. All right, Dwayne, that was great. Anything you want to promote before we end? Where to,
Well, I've got a new initiative coming out called the Vitality Manifesto. And there's going to be a lot of what we talked about in this today, in terms of, like, you know, trying to balance the whole biology part, which we all kind of really focus on, but also the psychology and the sociology to try and get it so we can perform the best, you know, possible. So that's coming out October. It's going to be launching and then fully kind of rolling out for the new year once I get a good cohort on that. I also would like to promote my coaching that I do for people like we've talked about, off-season coaching for folks that need, you know, help with their blood work. They don't have to be a bodybuilder per se, but you know, help with their blood work, or if they're bodybuilders, some off-season prep to get them ready so that, you know, if they didn't qualify for the Olympia this year, they can qualify next year, because we go in a lot healthier so that things work better. And you can find me on Instagram at DRDN
all
Jackson.
right, that's awesome. All right, thanks everyone for watching, and hope you guys liked it. If you have got some questions, maybe have them in the comments below, and me and Dwayne can maybe go over them after. But that was great, Dwayne. Thanks a lot.